There was a thick drizzling mist, which was sufficient to make the streets muddy and one's clothes damp. This the people are pleased to call Peruvian dew. That much rain does not fall is very certain, for the houses are covered only with flat roofs made of hardened mud, and on the mole shiploads of wheat were piled up, being thus left for weeks together without any shelter. I cannot say I liked the very little I saw of Peru. In summer, however, it is said that the climate is much pleasanter. In all seasons, both inhabitants and foreigners suffer from severe attacks of ague. This disease is common on the whole coast of Peru, but is unknown in the interior. The attacks of illness which arise from miasma never fail to appear most mysterious. So difficult is it to judge from the aspect of a country whether or not it is healthy, that if a person had been told to choose within the tropics a situation appearing favourable for health, very probably he would have named this coast. The plain round the outskirts of Callao is sparingly covered with a coarse grass, and in some parts there are a few stagnant, though very small, pools of water. The miasma, in all probability, arises from these; for the town of Arica was similarly circumstanced, and its healthiness was much improved by the drainage of some little pools. Miasma is not always produced by a luxuriant vegetation with an ardent climate, for many parts of Brazil, even where there are marshes and a rank vegetation, are much more healthy than this sterile coast of Peru. The densest forests in a temperate climate, as in Chile, do not seem in the slightest degree to affect the healthy condition of the atmosphere. The island of St. Jago, at the Cap de Verd, offers another strongly marked instance of a country which any one would have expected to find most healthy, being very much the contrary. I have described the bare and open plains as supporting, during a few weeks after the rainy season, a thin vegetation which directly withers away and dries up. At this period the air appears to become quite poisonous, both natives and foreigners often being affected with violent fevers. On the other hand, the Galapagos Archipelago, in the Pacific, with a similar soil, and periodically subject to the same process of vegetation, is perfectly healthy. Humboldt has observed that, under the torrid zone, the smallest marshes are the most dangerous, being surrounded, as at Vera Cruz and Cartagena, with an arid and sandy soil, which raises the temperature of the ambient air. On the coast of Peru, however, the temperature is not hot to any excessive degree, and perhaps in consequence the intermittent fevers are not of the most malignant order. In all unhealthy countries the greatest risk is run by sleeping on shore. Is this owing to the state of the body during sleep, or to a greater abundance of miasma at such times? It appears certain that those who stay on board a vessel, though anchored at only a short distance from the coast, generally suffer less than those actually on shore. On the other hand, I have heard of one remarkable case where a fever broke out among the crew of a man of war some 100 miles off the coast of Africa, and at the same time one of those fearful periods of death commenced at Sierra Leone. [Footnote: A similar interesting case is recorded in the Madras Medical Quarterly Journal, 1839, page 340. Dr. Ferguson, in his admirable paper, see 9th volume of Edinburgh Royal Transactions, shows clearly that the poison is generated in the drying process, and hence that dry hot countries are often the most unhealthy. No state in South America, since the declaration of independence, has suffered more from anarchy than Peru. At the time of our visit there were 4 chiefs in arms contending for supremacy in the government. If one succeeded in becoming for a time very powerful, the others coalesced against him, but no sooner were they victorious than they were again hostile to each other. The other day, at the anniversary of the independence, high mass was performed, the president partaking of the sacrament. During the Te Deum Laudamus, instead of each regiment displaying the Peruvian flag, a black one with Death's head was unfurled. Imagine a government under which such a scene could be ordered on such an occasion, to be typical of their determination of fighting to death. This state of affairs happened at a time very unfortunately for me, as I was precluded from taking any excursions much beyond the limits of the town. The barren island of St. Lorenzo, which forms the harbour, was nearly the only place where one could walk securely. The upper part, which is upwards of 1000 feet in height, during this season of the year, winter, comes within the lower limit of the clouds, and in consequence an abundant cryptogamic vegetation and a few flowers cover the summit. On the hills near Lima, at a height but little greater, the ground is carpeted with moss, and beds of beautiful yellow lilies called amanques indicates a very much greater degree of humidity than at a corresponding height at Iquique. Proceeding northward of Lima, the climate becomes damper, till on the banks of the Guayaquil, nearly under the equator, we find the most luxuriant forests. The change, however, from the sterile coast of Peru to that fertile land, is described as taking place rather abruptly in the latitude of Cape Blanco, 2 degrees south of Guayaquil. Callao is a filthy, ill-built, small seaport. The inhabitants, both here and at Lima, present every imaginable shade of mixture between European, Negro, and Indian blood. They appear a depraved, drunken set of people. The atmosphere is loaded with foul smells, and that peculiar one which may be perceived in almost every town within the tropics, was here very strong. The fortress, which withstood Lord Cochrane's long siege, has an imposing appearance; but the President, during our stay, sold the brass guns, and proceeded to dismantle parts of it. The reason assigned was that he had not an officer to whom he could trust so important a charge. He himself had good reason for thinking so, as he had obtained the presidentship by rebelling while in charge of this same fortress. After we left South America, he paid the penalty in the usual manner by being conquered, taken prisoner, and shot. Lima stands on a plain in a valley, formed during the gradual retreat of the sea. It is 7 miles from Callao, and is elevated 500 feet above it; but from the slope being very gradual, the road appears absolutely level, so that when at Lima it is difficult to believe one has ascended even 100 feet. Humboldt has remarked on this singularly deceptive case. Steep barren hills rise like islands from the plain, which is divided by straight mud walls, into large green fields. In these scarcely a tree grows, excepting a few willows, and an occasional clump of bananas and of oranges. The city of Lima is now in a wretched state of decay. The streets are nearly unpaved, and heaps of filth are piled up in all directions, where the black gallinazos, tame as poultry, pick up bits of carrion. The houses have generally an upper story, built on account of the earthquakes, of plastered woodwork; but some of the old ones, which are now used by several families, are immensely large, and would rival in suites of apartments the most magnificent in any place. Lima, the city of the kings, must formerly have been a splendid town. The extraordinary number of churches gives it, even at the present day, a peculiar and striking character, especially when viewed from a short distance. One day I went out with some merchants to hunt in the immediate vicinity of the city. Our sport was very poor, but I had an opportunity of seeing the ruins of one of the ancient Indian villages, with its mound like a natural hill in the centre. The remains of houses, enclosures, irrigating streams, and burial mounds, scattered over this plain, cannot fail to give one a high idea of the condition and number of the ancient population. When their earthenware, woollen clothes, utensils of elegant forms cut out of the hardest rocks, tools of copper, ornaments of precious stones, palaces, and hydraulic works are considered, it is impossible not to respect the considerable advance made by them in the arts of civilization. The burial mounds, called huacas, are really stupendous, although in some places they appear to be natural hills encased and modelled. There is also another and very different class of ruins, which possesses some interest, namely those of old Callao, overwhelmed by the great earthquake of 1746, and its accompanying wave. The destruction must have been more complete even than at Talcahuano. Quantities of shingle almost conceal the foundations of the walls, and vast masses of brickwork appear to have been whirled about like pebbles by the retiring waves. It has been stated that the land subsided during this memorable shock. I could not discover any proof of this, yet it seems far from improbable, for the form of the coast must certainly have undergone some change since the foundation of the old town, as no people in their senses would willingly have chosen for their building place the narrow spit of shingle on which the ruins now stand. Since our voyage, Monsieur Tschudi has come to the conclusion, by the comparison of old and modern maps, that the coast both north and south of Lima has certainly subsided. On the island of San Lorenzo there are very satisfactory proofs of elevation within a recent period. This, of course, is not opposed to the belief of a small sinking of the ground having subsequently taken place. The side of this island fronting the Bay of Callao is worn into 3 obscure terraces. the lower one of which is covered by a bed a mile in length, almost wholly composed of shells of 18 species, now living in the adjoining sea. The height of this bed is 85 feet. Many of the shells are deeply corroded, and have a